For listeners, could you tell us about MyComplianceOffice?
We offer a platform for businesses that are highly regulated. So lots of those are banks and financial firms, but some of them are other businesses as well. And that platform allows them to manage their compliance workload.
Where do you think AI can genuinely add value for MCO's customers?
One of the big risks with AI is that it can erode trust if it's not used correctly. But at the same time, I think the other piece of it is to look to solve the business problem.
Yeah.
For us, we want to build a better solution. We want to have better value props for our clients. We want to have more features. We want to offer them value back into their business that solves real business problems.
Yeah.
We're treating this as an acceleration opportunity. There's things we didn't think we could do for the next 10 or 15 years. We now think we can do in the next 18 months.
What decisions would have had the biggest impact on your growth as a leader?
So I think, the first thing I'd say is I would take every chance that comes your way. I've taken chances that haven't worked out, but I don't regret any of those. I occasionally regret chances I didn't take.
Paddy.
Hi, Martin.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I finally got you on.
I know. We've been talking about this for a while, actually, but it's good to be here.
Since I actually placed you in my compliance office many moons ago.
Wow, yeah. 18 months ago. It probably feels like longer in some ways, but yeah.
Very good, very good. And for listeners, could you tell us about My Compliance Office, what they do?
Sure. So we offer a platform for businesses that are highly regulated. So lots of those are banks and financial firms, but some of them are other businesses as well. And that platform allows them to manage their compliance workload. So it's all about them understanding maybe what their employees are doing or what their business is doing, managing that workload, particularly with respect to whatever compliance regulation they operate under, right? So lots of banks have regulations from maybe the central bank in Ireland or from the government or EU regulations they've got to comply with. And we help them manage that workload and provide those solutions.
Very good. And in the 18 months then since you have joined, how's the company going? Is it scaling? Is it growing?
Scaling and growing, yeah. I mean, I think, we'll talk a lot more about AI and where that's leading us all. But I think despite the challenges, we're a business that's growing. We're really keen to sort of take advantage of some of the opportunities that are ahead of us. And we've some exciting plans there and those kind of things. But it is going really well. We're growing in the right places. Spending a lot of my time actually talking to prospective clients as well, which is sometimes a distraction from the day job. But right, it's the right kind of problem, right? Those kind of closing those deals is important.
Yeah, no. Where would the clients, I'm trying to think, is there a majority? Are they mainly in the US or are they kind of spread out all throughout the globe?
So a lot in the US, historically a vast bulk. Increasingly, though, a lot more in Southeast Asia and Asia in general and in Europe. So spread across the globe, down through Africa and other parts of the world as well, Central and South America. So, I mean, they are global. I would say there's still a heavy bias towards North America, but not as much as it once was. And I'd say our future growth is probably much more focused outside of North America than the historic values.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. And before My Compliance Office, then you obviously worked at IBM, you worked at Curam Software.
Yeah.
What could you say you've learned from, I guess, the chapter of working at IBM?
So IBM's an interesting beast, right? It is extraordinarily good at operating at scale and does that in a way I suspect very few businesses can match. But in another sense, I think being that scale and operating at that scale to some degree is the millstone around their neck at the same time.
Yeah.
Like that's a super tanker of a business, right? A business with, and they don't like to talk about employee numbers, but it's still a 6-digit, north of 100K kind of number. And that kind of business just can't move fast, right? Like no matter with the best will in the world, it just can't. And to me, that's, it's both the blessing and the curse of an IBM. I think, the thing you take away from an organization like that is certainly for me that I took away was that, they're really very good at processizing things that everybody makes up as they go otherwise, perhaps. And that's really important. And it gives you a great degree of reproducibility around decision-making, which is hugely important. But at the same time, you've got to watch that and go, what's just enough process to keep where I am doing what I'm doing alive and not become paralyzed by it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is there's a history in IBM, which perhaps they've lost a lot over the years, and has been diluted. But there's some nuggets in there. There's a Watson Jr. quote that was everywhere at one stage: "Treasure the wild ducks."
Yeah.
And I think anybody who's worked in IT, can look back and go, "I've worked with some wild ducks," and those wild ducks can be amazing.
Yeah.
Or in the wrong environment, they suffer and you suffer and everyone suffers. And I
Yeah.
think that to me is the other part of it, which is really important. And to take those learnings from big organizations who spend a lot of time and money getting there is something perhaps that we're uniquely placed to do as we move through our careers,
Yeah, no, definitely. I think as a company scales and grows, and as you mentioned, IBM, there's structure and process. But once that structure and kind of those processes and maybe long, lengthy processes don't paralyze you, would it be a very different experience then from your days at Curam Software?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I joined Curam as a 25-person organization. We were at 750-ish when IBM acquired us. So, like, in one sense, that's not one company, right? It's about six. Along the way, we pivot, we restructured, we became other things along the way. But nonetheless, none of those was remotely like IBM, right? I think, in fairness, even I was young once. The young person who joined Curam wouldn't have been able to comprehend what IBM was in that sense, or the business that I joined and how I joined it. But I think, along the way, having gone through enough pivots, you get used to the idea that this enterprise, this Curam thing that we were all part of, isn't one thing. It's something that's going to evolve and change. And it evolved and changed again when we joined IBM. And that was just another piece of the journey,
Yeah. And Curam, obviously such a big success story. Can you kind of pinpoint or point out any traits why you think it was successful and then IBM came along?
Sure. I guess there's a couple of key things, Martin, to be honest. There's people, right? And I mean that probably in two senses, right? There's the leaders who had the vision and the drive to make it happen. And then there's the people who made it a reality. I guess for me, because it was so small when I joined, we were almost a village inside an IT company, right? We all knew each other. We lived in each other's lives. We spent so much of our time together. I met my wife inside Curam. Lots of other people did too. Like, we were a really, really close bunch. And I think there's an element of that is critical to the success, but it's also a very hard message, right? Because it's almost impossible to recreate. There's no science that says, okay, this is how you create a village inside your startup or small enterprise. But I think creating the space for people to be themselves and to succeed being themselves is probably the key in that.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think then, obviously that was such a great experience. And then your IBM days, when you go into a company like MyComplianceOffice, that's probably smaller, leaner, moves a bit faster. Did your time from IBM help influence kind of looking at a long-term technology strategy, architectural strategy at MCO?
It did. I mean, I think, I'm very fortunate, right? I get to draw on all my experience for all of these things. I think the IBM piece definitely is about structure and process and organization. And that's a journey that MCO have been on and continue to be on. Fortunately, there's a very strong team. It's not just me, very far from it, making all that happen. But certainly sort of architectural rigor, I guess, is something that is sort of coming in from my side. I think the other thing is the journey of the Curam story, right? That story of evolving from, as we used to say, being small enough to all sit in a room and shout at each other, up to a business that has scaled where you've got to operate through process and rules because you're not always in every room all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key part of it. And I think, that's where the two merge together, right? Because you don't want the chaos, but you don't want to be hamstrung, bound up by all the processes that a very large org like IBM would have. So what you're trying to do is navigate the in-between, right? And figure out what's just enough, what's the right process for this business, how do we do the right things?
Yeah. And what was it then, if you look at, let's say, MyComplianceOffice, what was it that really attracted you to them? Besides, obviously, a very good headhunter who sold you the dream.
Well, obviously, the sales pitch was out of this world, Martin. But I guess there's a couple of things, right? There's one is, it was an opportunity to do something that I knew would help.
Yeah.
And I knew I could help. An opportunity to put my skills into practice where I'd felt, by hook or by crook, the journey I'd been on had kind of left me in a place where I wasn't necessarily doing that. But I think the other thing was an organization almost on the cusp of something amazing, right?
Yeah.
And again, perhaps looking back to that Curam journey, it wasn't obvious at the beginning that it was going to turn out the way it did, right?
Yeah.
And it never is, right? But MCO, as I looked at it at the point where I joined, was almost very obviously on the cusp of something quite amazing. Sure, we might not pull it off, but that's part of the joy and the thrill of the journey as well. But at the same time, it was that combination of something I reckon I could genuinely help. There was obvious things I knew I could kind of do even before I got in the door, as well as that sort of locational opportunity of where MCO was on its journey as a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And now I guess on that journey, the big buzzword that everyone's well, it's not a buzzword, but AI, and obviously AI strategy. Where do you think AI can genuinely add value for MCO's customers?
So it's an interesting one, right? Like compliance, and is a business and a marketplace that's predicated on trust.
Mm.
And so one of the big risks with AI is that it can erode trust if it's not used correctly. So
Yeah.
so that's a big challenge for us. And one, a lot of our customers, when we talk to them about AI, are going, sure, Paddy, that's great, awesome. There's an off switch for this, right? But at the same time, I think the other piece of it is to look to solve the business problem. And I guess I'd go back to the Curam part of the story on that and IBM and say, you will be successful where you're solving the problem that your customers face as a business.
Yeah.
And if you can do that using AI, then you're providing AI as part of an overall solution to that. That's incredibly valuable, not a bolt-on or not a solution looking for a problem or whatever else.
Mm.
I think for us, with that, what we're talking about is the idea that in compliance, you can generate a huge workflow challenge within the org because you can flag all sorts of activities and events, and then users have to pick through them and go, well, is this important? Do I need to act on this? Is this, just tripping out a rule? So the idea of using AI to optimize those workflows, to help people prioritize, to help people see patterns that are positive or patterns that are negative through that data set and say, okay, hang on here. This cluster of things represent this normal business activity. They're all okay. This cluster of things represent an abnormal activity. You need to go look at that closer.
Mm.
And I think that's where we think there's huge potential upside in a lot of this.
Yeah, no, definitely. Is it easy enough to kind of bring people on the AI journey, when it comes to developers? Are people kind of on the train? Anyone resistant?
So it's interesting. I think, that leads you to another perspective on it, Martin, right? Like we have AI in the product, in MCO, the offering to our clients.
Yeah.
And we also have AI in MCO, the business, right? Enterprise AI. And I think they're quite different. I don't think there's no developer I've met in the last 18 months, probably a bit longer, even before MCO, but who's resistant to AI in that sense of the word, right? They're going, listen, these are tools and technologies. They look interesting. Potentially my future career depends on this. I want to be involved. I want to understand it. I want to learn more. I think when you start talking about changing people's workflow and process, that's always when everybody gets a bit less comfortable, right? And everybody's going, well, yeah, sure, it's okay over there, but like me, I have to change. Do I really need to do things differently? Why can't I? And it reminds me a lot of, back in the 90s when IDEs just started to come through.
Yeah.
And you had people, oh, no, I just use TextPad. I don't go with any of that. Or there's, guys running VI at the command line go, no, this is the only way to edit code. And I think there's that piece of the puzzle. And I think we have to be respectful of that, right? You've got to find a way to bring people on the journey with you.
Yeah.
There's always people who won't come on the journey, and ultimately you've got to make hard decisions. But the bigger part of it is creating space for everybody to come on the journey with you and make that transition. And I think that's where the difficulty lies. That's where there's more of a sales pitch to the people inside your organization. It's about how you change your business as well as changing your products. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah, no, I guess in terms of even software developers, like if you're interviewing a software developer, could you put a software developer through the entire interview process and offer them a job without kind of going into AI and what they're doing and if they work with it? Or is there certain roles that they need at certain roles that maybe not?
I don't know. I think, I go to the classic statement when it comes to particularly, what I'd class an individual contributor, right? Somebody who we expect to spend 80, 90% of their time writing code or developing scripts or whatever. I'm much more worried about their ability to embrace new tools and use them. I'm not necessarily worried about have you used Claude Code in this particular environment with these. They'll figure that out, right? If they're any good, they'll figure that out.
Yeah.
I would be worried about red flags if somebody goes, oh no, I don't use AI for anything. I don't trust it. It's not the done thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's going to be a challenge, right? The business we are and the journey we're on, that's not going to fly. But at the same time, much like anything else, much the same as when Visual Age for Java or Eclipse or whatever was all the in thing, it wasn't always about finding someone who'd use the exact tool you had. As long as they'd use something that was related, they had the right mindset, they were willing to embrace, that would be far more important than worrying about a particular tool or technology.
Yeah, of course. And I think you touched on it there. The word I don't trust AI. Obviously, MCOs, clients, it's such a highly regulated environment, massive banks, investment banks. You mentioned them saying, can we switch it off? Do you find that it's difficult to ensure that trust when it comes to introducing AI capabilities in the product?
Absolutely, and I think it's really interesting because you gotta look at the whole context for our clients, like our big clients, right? Imagine for a moment you're a big financial institution, right? The Bank of Martin.
Yeah.
Uh, you as a business are looking at AI and going, okay, this is part of our future. We've got to embrace this. This is a key thing. The people inside that organization who are entrusted with enforcing the compliance rules are inherently a highly conservative group of people inside that organization,
Yeah.
right? And most of us would already think about banks and financial institutions as largely being composed of conservative people, right? So you've got to respect that, right? They act that way and they're incentivized to do so because that's the right thing for the business.
Yeah.
So you've got to meet them where they are. I think for us, the key is about making sure that we're providing value, right? There's no point in approaching a group like that and going, yeah, we have this cool AI thing. It does something you never actually wanted or needed, but it's still cool, right?
Yeah.
That's never going to resonate with them. I think where we say, hey, you have this challenge in your business where you're overwhelmed by this kind of information. Here's an AI tool that helps you interact with that in a better way, provide better outcomes for you, better outcomes for your employers. Then we've got roadway to work with there, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing for us that's absolutely critical is explainability. And I guess a lot of people perhaps might say they pay lip service to it, right? For us, it's critical, right? Any AI tool has to be able to sort of show its homework and say, okay, this is what I told you. This is why. Here's the source for this Here's the source for this particular piece of information. Here's the source for this other piece of information. This is how I ended up where I ended up. And I think that's the other kind of key part of the process from our perspective, is to make sure when we provide you with something like that you've got that kind of insight at your fingertips. You can understand exactly where it's coming from, what its decision process was. Whether you agree with what it said or not is important, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you always have confidence about why you got told what you got told.
Yeah. No, definitely. Do you find, is it easy to measure then the productivity and how AI increases it? If you look at the technology and engineering org, you're like, okay, we've seen this shift or this increase.
It's funny. It's a constant refrain in the business at the moment, right? Like we're actively looking at a whole bunch of things. I think you can definitely see shifts of individual productivity.
Yeah.
Johnny got assigned this ticket. Johnny would have taken 3 days to do the ticket. Johnny got it done in a day and a half. No problem. You can see those, right? That's fine. The world is littered with those stories. But the challenge for us is we want to make a world where, everybody's going faster all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, and we're not looking for 1,000-fold increases, right? You're saying, well, like if we could go 30% faster or 20% faster, like what's the right number? But for that, it's interesting because that requires a bigger kind of change. I think for us, we think, our development process and life cycle is going to get changed by this. And in changing that, you go back to that pressure point we talked about earlier of asking individuals to change how they act and what they do. And that's much harder. But I think for us, we feel that's going to be key to unlocking those changes inside our organization. And I guess, by correlation, you're going to say the same for our clients, right? As we expose more features to them and more things, that's going to change their workflows and their process. And that's going to be a harder thing for people to consume. While initially we have that hump to get over where we're saying, we want you to use AI and maybe not. But actually, once you get over the hump, even then that, okay, I can use it. It's a one-off tool. I get a little bit of benefit to, you want me to use this tool and it's going to force me to change how I interact or how I work or what my workflow is. That's a much bigger and more impactful change and a journey I think we've got everybody to bring on over the time ahead of us.
Yeah, brilliant. I guess even reflecting that on the customer side, you said obviously you spend your time on customer calls. Are you getting feedback on how it's improving? I'm just trying to envisage, I don't know, someone on a trading desk in Goldman Sachs using, the product or the platform or the AI capabilities, how much it's improving their productivity.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So that leads to a very interesting point, Martin, and one I hadn't really thought about myself before I joined MCO, right?
Yeah.
That guy on the trading desk almost certainly interacts with our platform under duress.
Yeah.
Right. His job is to buy and sell and to make money, right? Buy, sell, whatever. Greed is good. Gordon Gekko's leaning over their shoulder. Although most of them are, most of them are probably so young, they've no idea who he is. But anyway, But they're forced to use our platform to record interactions so that we know what they're at, to make sure that they're not engaged on non-compliant activities. Let's call it that.
Yeah, of course.
So they use it under duress, right? The compliance team themselves spend a lot of their day in our application. So when we talk about AI features and adding value, a lot of it's about changing that workflow for the compliance team and how they interact with the product. The interesting bit of the story is, for the guy on the trading desk, as you alluded to, maybe the future of this looks very different, right? So maybe the answer is they don't ever see our platform ever again.
Yeah.
What they see is the fact that when they interact with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever their preferred agent of choice is, they can go, hey, I want to make a trade on IBM stocks. I need to pre-clear it with MCO. Can you record that for me? And, with MCP servers and all the right technology lined up behind the scenes, it all chains together and goes through. And then they never need to do that bit that they currently do under duress of logging into MCO and remembering where to click the buttons and opening the right forms and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I think that is a potentially hugely compelling side for those users. I think it raises all sorts of questions, right? And it's an interesting one. We had earlier in the year in particular, the sort of SaaSmageddon thing kind of caught the wind of the investment market and affected everybody's business valuations. There's a risk of another kind of app-mageddon almost in that kind of world, right? Where your app doesn't really exist anymore. But for me, the app's all about the data. I mean, AI is all about the data anyway, but the app's all about the data. So if somebody doesn't log into our website or use our webpage, I'm not sure that's actually a problem. I mean, philosophically, we're going to feel a bit odd about it and it's going to be a bit weird. But as long as the transactions arrive, we're handling the workflow, we're providing the value to the business about the tracking, the traceability, the audit, the rules, the execution, and all of it, then we're still doing the right things.
Yeah.
Even if nobody ever logs in to see it. And I think that's the key, perhaps, that's going to open up in this. And that's where I'd say, over the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to see real change sort of permeate through the market. It's more about how I suspect people interact with the world. We all went from a world before the web of interacting over phones and letters and writing checks and all those things to saying, oh no, you'll check on the web, or I Googled it, or whatever it was. I think, increasingly you hear people talking about asking ChatGPT where they might have Googled before. But I think the next step is where ChatGPT is just not a one-way source of information back, but also an actor on your behalf, and you instruct it to do things, and that permeates out into the real world. And I think that's going to be an interesting journey for us all to go on. There's going to be lots of questions. There's going to be lots of opportunities as well, though.
Yeah. Okay. No, very good. No, it's really interesting. I'm trying to look down the lens of my compliance office in, let's say, 5 years. Being very ambitious, are there things you think that the platform will be doing then that it's not doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of them are those kind of interactions where people have the ability to interact through other tools or platforms and still interact with us. The other thing I think is data, right? You can't have a story about AI without a story about data.
Yeah.
And I think, for us, up until now, we've provided transactional platforms to our clients. They allow them to manage their business and run their business. Insight has been a very small part of that. I think insight on your business is the other place where I see big change coming.
Yeah.
We have some products in the works that allow people to use a combination of an exposed data set and AI tooling to ask questions about their business. And I think those kind of things are actually going to be quite business changing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, lots of businesses went on a data journey over the last maybe 10 years, but compliance isn't really one of those just yet. And I think we're just at that tipping point. I think AI might just provide the sort of last push to get that over the edge.
Yeah. Like when you think of obviously AI being useful in compliance, it is it's very important, isn't it? The data quality and governance behind it. If you're asking those questions, if the data isn't good, if there's no quality there, then obviously it won't work and be as useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like garbage in, garbage out was true in the 60s and 70s. It's just as true now. The challenge is we've sort of turbocharged those output mechanisms with LLMs and other AI tools. And that means if the data's not just right, you're off on a highway to nothing, right? And if I talk about, going back to that sort of showing your homework as we build AI tools for our clients, if the data quality is not good, we can do all the right things show you all the homework in the world, but it'll still be a useless insight because the data quality isn't there.
Yeah.
And that's another piece of the journey, one that, challenges us, but also challenges our clients, right? Because, ultimately we live and die by the quality of the data that they're supplying into our system. And so it becomes a kind of conjoined journey to get that data quality story right.
Yeah, no, it is so important. You mentioned SaaSmageddon. You mentioned obviously what kind of happened with stock prices. Obviously jobs come into it as well. From your opinion, looking at growing, scaling, hiring, are you kind of looking at it going, do we need as many people to do what we used to do? Am I going to hire a manager who, instead of, I don't know, managing 100 people, is going to be managing 100 AI agents? Like, how are you looking at it?
So I think, there's multiple challenges, right? I think if you looked at this world and said, I want to do the same thing I do now in 10 years' time, your numbers would go down. You would say, we'll do it with less. To me, though, that's the wrong answer because managing your way down is always a highway to nothing. Like in a lot of ways, I think really we've gone on a journey from handcrafted code back when I started writing it, to fast fashion has come for the code writing industry, right?
Yeah.
And that's important, right? That value of a written piece of code is falling. Maybe it's close to zero in a lot of cases now, right? In some cases with the SaaSmageddon argument.
Yeah.
But that's actually important for us to think about because to me, then success as a business is about going, okay, that's true. Now, how do we define ourselves? How do we make an impact in the market?
Yeah.
For us, we want to build a better solution. We want to have better value props for our clients. We want to have more features. We want to offer them value back into their business that solves real business problems.
Yeah.
We're treating this as an acceleration opportunity. There's things we didn't think we could do for the next 10 or 15 years. We now think we can do in the next 18 months.
Yeah.
So we're chasing this hard. We're still hiring. We've done quite a bit of hiring already this year. I have a bunch of open tickets in Dublin, Martin, as you well know. We're going to chase this down, and we're going all in on this. And we're saying, listen, the answer here is not to de-invest in the face of a challenge, but is actually to get in there, build a solution that offers business value, that it becomes a sort of a palisade against these kind of attacks.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess it's so important to get the mix of AI and kind of human judgment right. How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, Martin. And I think that's a journey humanity is probably going to go on over the next 10 years, right? But for us, I think right now, it's all about human in the loop. It's about providing the best possible information back to the human and saying, hey, bud, this is your call, but this is where we are, right? I think, though, it's important that we think about that in a couple of ways. Like, and this applies both inside our business, as we were talking about earlier, and for our clients, right?
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is face a human with a decision where 90% of the time the decision is, yeah, just do what you said, bud.
Yeah.
And it's only 5 or 10% you get to say no. Because people will just turn into, the Homer Simpson thing with the little nodding thing to click the button. Yeah. That's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that it's human in the loop in a way that the human has agency, that they're being asked a kind of question that meaningfully gets them engaged with it, that we can provide the information in a way they can meaningfully absorb it and move on, right? And I was thinking about this earlier, and I was thinking about decision fatigue, and my wife doesn't agree with me on this, but I really felt like when we bought our house, after a certain point in time, it's like, I don't care what color the wall in this particular bedroom is. Like, sure.
Yeah.
Or, which kettle do you think? And there's like 15 identical kettles. And
yeah.
Like,
any of them. Yeah.
And they're grand.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, in some sense, there is a risk with all of this technology and AI in particular that we wind up getting decision fatigue despite that drive for a human in the loop, right? Because we're asking the human a question, they're going, or whatever. So I think that's really important that we make very thoughtful decisions about that. Yeah. I think that's where, the design architecture, in possibly not the software architecture sense of the word, but solution architecture becomes really important. And again, I think that's where, it doesn't really matter that Claude Code can turn out hundreds of lines of code in fractions of a second, provided you've got enough tokens in your account.
Yeah.
What actually matters is, are you building the right stuff?
Yeah.
And are you building the right stuff in the right way that it solves business problems for your customers? And I think if you can do that, you've got it licked.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it sort of falls in behind you.
Yeah, no, exactly as you said, like building the right stuff for the customers and what they need. But in financial services, obviously it's a non-negotiable regulation, reliability. How do you drive innovation in that environment?
So it's interesting. I think there's a couple of places, right? I think, to me, it always goes back, and it was driven into me by my bosses back in Curam at the very start, right? Solve the business problem that the customer faces.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important bit. I think if we said, hey, you have this thing, it works perfectly well today and it's completely predictable, we're going to replace it with AI and you won't understand how it came up with the answers. Everybody would like roll their eyes at us and walk off, right?
Yeah.
You might argue there's one or two startups in the space trying to do that, but we'll see how the market treats them over time. But to me, that's not the place to go, right? The place to go is to say, hey, you have this process at the moment and it doesn't work really well. It gives you lots of false positives. It's missing things that it should be catching. It only works a fraction of the time. Here's how we can use AI and we can go from being 20% right to 50% right or 70% right. There we can make a big difference. We can genuinely go in and solve business problems. And to me, Martin, that's where you've got to go in with your eyes open. You've got to embrace the characteristic of AI. This thing is non-deterministic. It's statistical. It's not going to be right 100% of the time. Where can I apply it that's still valid and an improved solution to the business problem? I think when you can do that, you're away in a hack.
Yeah, no, exactly, where it's adding value. And obviously moving away from AI now, you've been in the Irish tech ecosystem for quite some time. How many years?
I don't know. Yeah. Let's not get into numbers on that one.
How do you see, one, how has it evolved, but how do you see the Irish tech ecosystem right now compared to back when you started?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think the one that I was thinking about this earlier is, when I finished in college in the 90s, he says quietly, we were the first year as we graduated where everybody who wanted a job got a job.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time we were a place where, people were kind of meek and we're here to get the job done. And yeah, can we have a job, please, lads? We'd like to help write some software. And I think there's a swagger to the Irish software industry now that's a little bit more, knows its value to the world. Right?
Yeah.
We are a world-class center. We offer huge value. All of the largest IT shops and non-IT shops with software development houses are here in Ireland. And I think that's well earned, right? A lot of us worked long hours, late nights, and all the rest of it to make that happen.
Yeah.
But also, I suppose there's a risk there, right? Like there's lots of examples through history of places where they've built up that world-class reputation in one industry or another, and then sort of gone, okay, we're grand now. Let's sit back, eat the grapes, lie down and take it easy, and then not had a good outcome. So I think that swagger is great, and it's a real pleasure to see it. But I think there's a lurking warning there for us all too, of we've got to make sure we keep being top of the game and driving that forward. And I think that to me is the big change that I see from, when I first joined the sort of hordes of Irish IT.
Yeah. No, that's definitely it. I guess if your advice to someone early in their technology career, you back then, what would you say, what decisions would have had the biggest impact on your growth as a leader?
So I think, the first thing I'd say is I would take every chance that comes your way. I've taken chances that haven't worked out, but I don't regret any of those. I occasionally regret chances I didn't take. Yeah. And that will be the statement, when you're young, particularly, but to people at any age, to me, the chance comes your way, just grab it, see where it leads, play it out, walk the walk. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You walk away, you go on to something else. But if you can't take those opportunities, then you're on a challenging path for yourself. And I think, that to me would be the most important message to somebody starting out, or even somebody at my point in my career. I mean, I walked away from Meritive with north of 25 years service when I left to join MCO.
Wow, yeah.
And I made that decision because I felt it was the right opportunity for me to pursue. And I would emphasize that, right? That's what I've done. That's what I've done the whole way through my career. If I can offer any piece of advice to people, it's go seize those opportunities when they come in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. Take hold of it. On the flip side, is there anything you said no to? Maybe any regrets? Anything that keeps you up at night?
Nothing keeps me up at night. Well, no, that's probably untrue. I have I was going to say two teenage daughters, but actually one of them's not a teenager anymore. So, but obviously, life brings you all sorts of worries, and some of those occasionally keep me up at night. But there's nothing in tech that would bother me to that degree or leave me sweating over it. I think, if I was to berate myself for anything, it would be sometimes being slow to make those decisions, to take a chance, right? Yeah. To have looked at it and hemmed and hawed and go, maybe not. I'm kind of comfortable here or whatever. But that's a minor thing.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And is there any technology trends you're genuinely excited about?
Well, it's funny. I guess, the ability of AI and LLMs to change the world, I would say, is the thing that I'm excited about. I think, it has changed technology. It has changed technology business. It's probably changed all of us. But I don't think we've really seen the impact on society at large yet. Yeah. And I am actually genuinely excited about that, right? I think, there's huge potential upside. There's all sorts of potential downside. There's all sorts of risks embedded in all of these things. But I think at this point, the genie's out of the bottle. So we're all strapped in for this ride no matter what. Yeah. So let's embrace it. Figure out what we can do to have the best possible impact on the world, do the right things for the right people, and make it a better place. And I think that to me is really exciting, right? That's always been the thing in my career that's caused me to go, okay, let's go do this thing,
Yeah, no, definitely exciting times. Is there anything then, any trends that you think is getting far more attention than it actually deserves?
So I'm almost tempted to give you the same answer back, right? I think
flip it.
I think we've gotten a little bit obsessed about certain characteristics of things like LLMs and other AI-based technology. And I think there's a real risk there. The Gartner hype cycle is probably, everybody's sick of it at this point. But that notion of having been oversold, I think is probably true as well. I think particularly there are some businesses, I'm not going to name names, but the people with very, very large investments behind some of this technology who are trying to say, we've got a panacea.
Yeah.
And I've heard that story before. I heard it from other vendors at other times with lots of investment in particular technology stacks. It's never quite true for them. And I'm inclined to believe it's not really true for these guys either, right? I think, for me, we have a hugely powerful technology. It's hugely compelling. The biggest risk to it is almost that overselling of it, to suggest that, there's lots of, there's, again, you can phrase it in multiple ways, right? It can do anything for anybody. Well, no, it can't.
Yeah.
and we've got to embrace that too. And I think, to me, that's the biggest risk to all of this is that over projection of capability. And I think it's the biggest thing that will cause it all to come crashing down around our ears if we're not careful, right? So
okay, good answer. So it's two sides of the coin then. Very good. What do you think the next great chapter of Irish technology looks like?
So I don't know. And I put my hand on my heart and say I could give you an answer. And by the time I walk out the door of this room, I'll be proved wrong.
Yeah.
What I would say is it's about the people. Back to that thing I said at the start. It's about great visionaries, right? Whether that's Brian Fahey's the CEO of MCO, who's brought us on this journey, or Ronan Rooney and John Hearn, who set Curam up and brought us on that journey.
Yeah.
A visionary to bring it forward, and a great team behind them. And again, both of those businesses have that in spades. I think that combination is what will define the future of Irish tech. And I don't know if that's going to be in the pure AI space or if it's going to be in a very different domain or other business area. I wouldn't deem to predict on those things, but a great team. And again, maybe, you asked about saying things to people out in the market looking at the start of their careers, perhaps.
Yeah.
I would say find a great team.
Yeah.
And then make sure that you're part of a great team. I think, IT can lead people into this notion of great individuals.
Yeah.
I don't buy it, right? Yeah. Great teams are what make great solutions, build great businesses. And I think, to me, that's the other piece of the puzzle. If you're going to go and seek it out and say, this is a great team, well, then be part of it. Be part of the team. Push when you have to push, carry when you have to carry, lead when you have to lead, but you're part of the team.
Yeah, very good. Find a great team and be part of a great team. It's your quote. That's what we might call the podcast episode. Look, Paddy, it's been great having you on the podcast. You've obviously had an amazing journey so far. And yeah, I wish you continued success and see how things go. Thanks again.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.